Welcome to Appointed Counsel, a podcast presented by Tennessee Court Talk for those involved in indigent representation. I'm Joe Byrd, lead attorney for the Indigent Services Team of the Tennessee Administrative Office of the Courts.
Episode 14, Proper Billing for Attorney Activities. Well, in this podcast today, I have a very special guest. It might be someone that you don't think of because her work here at the AOC doesn't necessarily directly impact the Indigent Services Team, but she's a valuable member of the Legal Services and Judicial Development Division. She's a friend of mine, and she has an interesting background in terms of what attorneys have to do regarding billable hours. Debra Sandlin is here, who serves as our paralegal. Introduce yourself to us, Deborah, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am Debra Sandlin. Good afternoon, first of all. I am Debra Sandlin. I've been here at the AOC since 2020. So I started when no one was here.
During COVID, right?
During COVID.
Okay.
And I am paralegal, I'm compliance analyst, I am a plethora of other things, instructor, all of that.
So some of the functions that you would do generally here in the Legal Services and Judicial Development Division would be what?
I deal with publications. I deal with the Blue Book, online access. I deal with designations. I deal with CLEs, boards and commissions. And I think there's more, but that should suffice, right?
Yeah, so you don't just have an associate's degree in paralegal studies, you have advanced degrees.
I do have advanced degrees. My master's is in conflict management, and my doctorate is in education.
Now, I noticed that they moved you very close to my office when you say conflict management. Now I understand why a lot better.
That's so I can weed out all the conflict and friction.
There you go. So you do have an EDD.
I do.
And I don't say Dr. Sandlin as much as I should.
You're fine.
So,
Deborah is fine. I use it when I need to.
Now, you also do something in the evenings on your own time, another business that you do.
I do. That is where I am a compliance analyst, and I deal with billing.
Talk to me about that. What do you mean you do billing? What does that mean?
So I have several clients, and those clients create billing guidelines, and law firms, that particular client, let's use something that everybody might know. So let's say Walmart is my client. It's not, but let's just say it is. So Walmart employs several law firms around the country. So I get those billing guidelines, and Walmart will say, hey, this is what we are willing to pay for, and they give codes and their instructions and the agreements that comes with the legal spend company where I am. So then the law firms will send in their invoices, their billable hours, and as a compliance analyst, I would take the guidelines that my client has already put forth and weigh that against those invoices, and I'll either reduce them or eliminate them based only on the guidelines that my client has, because ultimately I'm working for Walmart.
Sure. So, my background is before working for the state in different functions, I was a county attorney and a city attorney. But then in private practice, I was what we would call a street lawyer, right?
Okay.
Taking different kinds of cases. So billable hours was really sort of a pain in the neck, to be honest with you, right? But there are firms, though, that what you're talking about, they might work for an insurance company. Maybe they do defense work. Or
Workers'
they
comp.
may, pardon me?
Workers' comp.
Workers' comp. They may have a private client like Walmart that they do work for. And especially younger attorneys, newer attorneys, I should say, the idea, the very concept of tracking my activities and keeping track of it by hour is pretty foreign, right?
It can be, but you have to understand that in a law firm, a traditional type law firm, they are accustomed to keeping hours. That's what they do. And paralegals as well. They keep hours. They have software that assists them in keeping up with those hours. But the software has to be conducive to the business that they're in, the type of law that they practice. So when I see it, it makes sense. right? So the legal spend company will employ attorneys and paralegals and other legal professionals that understand the inner workings of a law firm or that area of law. And that's how we know what to reduce or what to eliminate or what to leave alone.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that work in just a minute. Let me just say that when I go to law schools and talk to law students, usually I'm trying to get to the 3 L's just before they graduate. I try to explain to them that you're about to embark in changing the way you look at life, because now we're talking about the billable hour. And part of that, as it relates to indigent services, is it's guided by Rule 13, which is guided by the billable hour, which is really the standard, right, in the legal profession. I mean, there might be firms that do flat rate fees for maybe a will, or maybe they'll say, we'll do a misdemeanor for $500, or, I have a basic divorce that I do that if it's not contested, you pay me $1,500 or something like that. Most firms, in fact, we have rules of professional responsibility that require us to, if we receive money and we're going to bill against that money, we have to put it into a trust fund and trust account, and then we have to bill against that. So billable hour, it's almost hard to escape. And it really works with indigent services too, because that's the way Rule 13 is based on, and it's really the standard. And I think that a lot of attorneys, like I said, newer attorneys, they've got to get themselves sort of
acclimated.
Yeah, acclimated to thinking through. Now, the companies that you work for could be individual companies, but the work you do is basically looking at the invoices of these billable hours, right?
Exactly.
And if I understand what you do is you'll say, okay, drafted a motion for summary judgment and brief, 7.5 hours. You actually have guidelines that talk about how much time will you allow that person to be paid, right?
In the case like the example that you just gave, if it goes, let's say, right up to 8 hours, then I might put a note out there saying this entry exceeds the 8-hour day. Let's say it's 8 hours and 30 minutes. I might put that out there and still make necessary adjustments, or I may not have to. But attorneys have to be careful not to block bill.
Okay, and this is something we do in indigent services, and I want to remind my listeners today, Deborah's not working and talking about doing this as one of my auditors in the indigent services team. This is the work you do for the broader legal community outside of your work here at the AOC.
Exactly.
And so this block billing, tell us about block billing and what that means.
Well, simply, it could be telephone call to John Doe regarding deposition, and email to co-counsel for XYZ. That's block billing. So what would happen is the code that I would use would be B1, which means bundle. And I would take all of that time because that's what it requires me to do. And then in the explanation, I would put email, telephone call. So that tells the attorney or the billing coordinator of that firm that has to be split up to be 2 entries and not just one.
And the standard that the indigent services team uses, Rule 13, basically doesn't lay this out, but it's the standard that we use, the federal courts use, is that we look for attorneys to bill in tenths of an hour.
Right.
Is that something?
6/10, same thing.
6/10 of an hour. So when you see 1 hour this, 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, 7 hours, 6 hours, rounded numbers, that's not something that's going to pass the snuff test, right? In the legal community at large. No,
and the one thing that would help them, at least in the law firm arena, that they have the proper software. Software makes the difference. Depending on the software that a firm uses, it might be something that dings on them when they try to round outside of the tenths, right? Maybe. It just depends on the firm. It depends on, because a lot of my clients are in California. So I may speak to them if they get nervous and have a problem and want to talk to me. I may never speak to them. It just depends. But if I end up deducting more than they are willing to let go of, then they want to call and say, what are you doing? That kind of thing. And I may have to explain it based on the billing guidelines.
Right. So you have actually a set of billing guidelines.
I do.
That says we're not paying more than X dollars for these kinds of activities, right?
Right.
And the good side is that's not something that the indigent
No.
representation attorneys, the attorneys who take appointed cases,
Right.
they don't. Our auditors aren't looking for that so much. Now, they will flag one and bring it to my attention if it looks way out of line with something
Right.
they're used to seeing.
Right.
But they don't. Now, this is an interesting work that you're involved in and that you do, so much so that you recently wrote an article.
I did write an article.
Tell us about it.
I was so excited about that. So occasionally I will work with the National Association for Legal Assistance, better known as NALA. And I've done some webinars for them. And one of the webinars that I did was a class that I created called To Thine Own Billing Be True. And in that article, I discussed what legal billing was, the different types of legal billing, which you've already named, and just talked to them, or was talking to the audience, the attorneys and other legal professionals, about how best to keep up with their billing. And when you keep contemporaneous notes, and you have to be disciplined when you do this. When you do that, it kind of makes that whole billing process easy, and you don't wait to the end of the day or the end of the week when you've forgotten half of what you've done, and then you're putting time out there that may not be as accurate. Because at the end of the day, you really want to focus on the client.
Sure.
That's what's important.
And, I read your article. It was a condensed article, but it was very good. And, it makes me think back to something you just said about having the right software, because some softwares you can actually create Microsoft Word documents in them, and it will actually help track your time, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It can.
That's what I thought. And I've used different kinds of time tracking, time management, and billing legal programs. There's a lot out there for small attorneys, large attorneys.
There are so many. And the firm decides what works best for them. And sometimes it's through trial and error. But even in having the proper software, there's still a certain amount of discipline that has to be there as well. You have to keep records and take notes simultaneously while you're working. And it takes a little while, especially for new legal professionals. It takes a while, because if you're just graduating and getting into the law firm
and a normal person
yes,
living normal life,
and this is foreign to you,
yeah,
you're sitting there thinking, now what did I do, and how did I do it, and how do I put it on this in this software? And it goes on and on and on. And after a while, though, when you understand that that's your money, that's your job, literally that's your job, that may be bonuses at the end of the year on how much you've billed throughout the year. It can be a lot of different things or incentives that the law firm will set up for you. So,
and of course, attorneys who take appointed cases can't see bonuses. In fact, we want to see them get more money.
But that's the advantage of being a paralegal.
Yeah, that's right. But, we do. Our rule says that, counsel will be held to a high degree of care in keeping of contemporaneous time records, supporting their claims and in the application for payment, and that we ask them to distinguish between in-court hours and out-of-court hours. And sometimes we have to ask them for the contemporaneous time records to support their claims. We do allow them some things that probably wouldn't pass snuff for yours. So, like, on a docket call day in General Sessions Court, it can be a crazy busy day. You got the public defender, the DAs going back and forth, and then you have the attorney who's taken appointed counsel. Well, he might get appointed, or she might get appointed to 3 or 4 clients over here and over there, and they're moving between the judge and the DA and their client, and trying to talk to the PD. Why are you? You've got the co-defendant,
exactly.
and so what we allow them to do in those cases is we allow them to just say, okay, if you were in court for that 3 hours, you can sort of put that, apportion that to the total amount of time to each client. That wouldn't pass snuff for you for the most part.
You have to really, because the attorneys that I work with, they go to court as well. and they're preparing for trials, but that's a lot different than what you're saying.
Right.
And I think that the attorneys in a situation like what you described, they still have to set up some kind of routine to where they can be as true to their billing, with as much integrity as possible, so that they will come out at least, if not on point, very close to it.
So the listeners of this podcast by now are sick of hearing me say, back in my day, but 20 years ago when I was taking appointed counsels, taking appointed cases, I learned to keep my day. I think I had a day runner at one time, and then eventually got the Franklin Planner. I still use my Franklin Planner, by the way.
Those were good.
Yeah, I know. And I always kept it with me. The worst thing that happened was when Blackberries came out, and I tried to use BlackBerry, and it didn't communicate with the law firm's scheduling. And so I would sit in court, and I remember the judge one time just looking at me saying, "Mr. Byrd, are you available on this date?" Give me just a minute, Your Honor. Mr. Byrd, and finally just saying, "Just go call them."
Right,
exactly. So, it is a discipline, and it's something that attorneys have to do. Well, you did a great job on the article. I love talking to you, because even though what your work is different than indigent representation, it is still very common. It's very connected. It's, our system reflects what the federal system is.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, the CJA panels. And so we really appreciate you. And
thank you.
In terms of what you do on the other issues, on the other things you do for us in legal services, in judicial development, which I am part of that, and my division is part of that, you're just outstanding, and I appreciate your friendship and appreciate you being with me here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great opportunity.
For more information, check out the Indigent Representation webpage at tncourts.gov.